Hello, welcome to Microeconomics with Untitled. In this session, we are focusing on cost in the long run. Unlike in the short run, the firm has more than one variable cost in the long run. That is, both labor and capital are variable. And the production cost in the long run is the sum of the labor cost and capital cost. We want to know how a firm can choose its combination of inputs, that is labor and capital, to minimize its cost of producing a given output. And to determine that, we use the Isocost line. In this graph, we given capital on the y-axis and labor on the y-axis. And these lines here are Isocost lines. And we can see here that as it shifts, as the Isocost lines shifts to the right, it shows that costs are increasing from Isocost line C0 to Isocost C2. And this equation here is for the Isocost line. If we are given, for instance, Isocost line C1, then it shows all possible combinations of labor and capital that can be purchased. For example, we can have K2 units of capital and L1 units of labor, or K1 units of capital and L2 units of labor on this cost here. The slope of the Isocost line is the negative ratio of input prices. You will recall that in our production lesson, we explained that the Isoquant curve shows all the different combinations of labor and capital that produce the exact same amount of output. But so where does the firm minimize its cost given the Isoquant curve and given the Isocost line? Costs are at a minimum at point A. It's at point A because this is where the Isocost curve C1 is tangent to the Isoquant curve Q. And at this point, the firm minimizes cost by using K2 inputs of capital and L2 units of labor. Other input combinations like K3 and L1 and K1 and L3, they yield the same output as they are on the same Isoquant curve. However, they are not tangent to the Isocost line, and you can see that they actually are at a higher cost at Isocost line C2. What happens if the price of labor increases? The firm will then substitute capital for labor. The Isocost line becomes steeper. And you can see that on this line here, it becomes tangent to the Isoquant curve at point B. And now at point B, the firm uses K3 units of capital and L1 units of labor. The firm has responded to the higher price of labor by substituting capital for labor in the production process. Let us now examine how the Isocost line relates to the firm's production process. You will recall that in our analysis of production technology, we showed that the marginal rate of technical substitution of labor for capital is the negative of the slope of the isoquant and is equal to the ratio of the marginal product of labor and capital. But we also stated that the slope of the Isocost line is the negative ratio of input prices. It follows then that when a firm minimizes the cost of producing a particular output, the following condition should hold. And if we rewrite this equation, what we get is marginal product of labor over wages equals to marginal product of capital over the rental rate. What this means here, marginal product of labor over wages, is the additional output that results from spending an additional dollar for labor. And for marginal product of capital over the rental rate is the additional output that results from spending an additional dollar for capital. This is what is called the least cost rule, where a firm achieves the most output per dollar spent on inputs. Let us look at the following example. A bakery produces loaves of bread using two inputs, that is bakers, that is labor, and industrial ovens, and that is capital. And the hourly wage for a baker is 200 Rand, and hourly rental rate for ovens is 400 Rand. At the current level of production, hiring one more baker adds 10 loaves of bread per hour to total output. That is, the marginal product of labor is 10 loaves. And renting one more oven adds 30 loaves of bread per hour to total output. That is, the marginal product of capital is 30 loaves. So is the bakery minimizing its cost? Remember that our equation is marginal product of labor over wages equals to marginal product of capital over the rental rate. This is if we want to minimize cost. What we have, it's the marginal product of labor is 10 loaves and the wage is at 200 Rand, and the marginal product of capital is 30 loaves and the rental rate is 400 Rand. This gives us marginal product of labor over wages equals to 0.05, and marginal product of capital over the rental rate, it's 0.075. So we are definitely not minimizing costs here. And we can see that the bakery gets more output per money spent on capital at 0.075 as it is greater than 0.05. So if the bakery, the second question is, if the bakery is not minimizing costs, which input should it use more of and which input should it use less of? So to minimize costs, the bakery should rent more ovens because we're getting more output per money spent on capital. So it should minimize cost. To minimize cost, the bakery should rent more ovens and hire fewer bakers. Thank you for your time. Please remember to like, to subscribe, and to comment.